Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The overhead lights in the conference room buzzed faintly, casting a cold glow over the glossy mahogany table. 10 executives sat in stiff-backed leather chairs, arms crossed, eyes glued to the man at the head of the table, Derek Vaughn, Senior Director of Operations at Grayson & Company. He wore his arrogance like a tailored suit, lips twisted into that familiar smug grin. And I, Mason Carter, stood on the opposite end, my breath steady, my hands calmly folded in front of me. I'd been summoned to this performance review meeting last minute, but I wasn't surprised. Not one bit. Derek leaned back in his chair, theatrically flipping through a few sheets of paper before letting them fall onto the table with a flutter. "You know, Mason," he began, drawing out every word like he was savoring it. "We gave you a shot. We gave you resources, time. And this is what you bring to the table?" He gestured toward the data I had just presented. A 6-month rollout strategy designed to shift our dying business model into the digital age. "It's bold, it's unorthodox," I replied, keeping my voice even. "But it's where the market is heading. If we don't adapt now—" "We're not here for your TED Talk, Carter," Derek interrupted, voice rising as he leaned forward. "We're here because you've been acting like a rogue visionary when you're just a mid-level project manager." Chuckles echoed around the table. That's when I knew it was coming, and I let it. He stood up, pressing his palms into the table. "You're not leadership material. You never were. Your team doesn't respect you. Your performance is subpar. You're disruptive and you're done here." He paused for dramatic effect. "You're fired, effective immediately." He smirked again, that condescending smile I'd fantasized about wiping off his face for years. A hush fell over the room. I glanced around. Not a single person looked me in the eye. Not Aaron, the junior analyst I'd mentored. Not Jared, the guy I once covered for when his wife was in the hospital. Not even Stephanie, my manager, who used to sing my praises just months ago. They all sat in silence. But why wasn't Mason fighting back? Why was he so calm? And why did he let himself get humiliated in front of everyone? I slowly picked up my portfolio, the same one I'd carried to every meeting for the last 3 years. I clicked it shut and tucked it under my arm. No outburst, no last-minute plea, no fight. Just a nod. "I understand," I said, turning toward the door. "Security will escort you out," Derek added, with a voice dripping in self-importance. "Standard protocol." Of course, to make it more humiliating. 2 guards appeared outside the glass doors like they had rehearsed it. As they walked me out of the conference room, I caught a reflection of myself in the glass. Clean-cut, sharply dressed, back straight. But no one could see the grin forming just beneath the surface. Because what they didn't know was this. I owned the building we were standing in, literally. Why didn't Mason reveal that he owned the building? The guards were polite. They didn't touch me, just walked a step behind as I exited the floor and made my way to the elevator. The button lit up with a soft ding, and as the doors slid open, I turned slightly. One last glance back. Derek was still standing there, behind the conference room glass, gloating to the rest of the team like a football coach after a win. But was he really in control, or was he being played? What if this entire scene had been orchestrated from the very beginning? The elevator doors shut. Down in the lobby, I walked past the receptionist, who looked up with a sympathetic smile. She didn't know yet. No one downstairs did. I stepped outside into the cool autumn air, the breeze ruffling my suit jacket as I paused on the sidewalk in front of the massive office tower. Parkline Plaza, read the sleek steel letters above the revolving doors. The very building Derek believed belonged to a faceless real estate group. But I was the faceless group. I stared up at the floors above, 8 stories of glass and concrete, and my jaw clenched with satisfaction. Because 2 years ago, when no one would give me a job, when I was sleeping in my cousin's basement eating instant noodles for dinner, I decided I'd never work under someone again. I'd work in silence. I'd fail in private. And then I'd rise. So what exactly happened in those 2 years? What kind of deal turned a broke ex-entrepreneur into a building owner? And what was Mason planning now that the mask had come off? My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Eric Jameson, my lawyer and silent partner. Showtime. He doesn't know yet. Should we send the lease renewal email now? I smirked. Not yet. Let him enjoy the win for a day. Because the next 48 hours would change everything. Why let them fire Mason if he's the landlord? 2 years earlier. Rain slapped against the windshield, like nature itself was angry at me. The heater in my car didn't work, hadn't in weeks, and the cold from outside had crept into my bones. I was parked behind a gas station off Route 58, engine off to save the last quarter tank of gas, and I could see my breath fog up the glass. I pulled my hoodie tighter, as if cotton could protect me from the truth. I was 29 years old, broke, alone, and sleeping in the backseat of a rusted Honda Civic with a cracked taillight and 3 missed car payments. Just 6 months earlier, I was on top of the world, founder of a tech startup, full of ambition and caffeine-fueled optimism. But one bad investor, one lawsuit, and a few naive decisions later, it all crumbled. How did Mason fall so far, so fast? What happened to the company he once believed would change the world? The worst part wasn't losing the business. It was losing them. My friends disappeared. The ones who toasted with me at rooftop parties, who said we'd be rich by 30. Ghosted. My girlfriend, Lana, lasted 2 months into the collapse before packing her things and leaving a note on the counter. You're chasing smoke. I need someone real. I didn't blame her, not really. But I did wonder what it meant about me. Had I become a man no one believed in? Why did everyone give up on Mason so easily? Was he just chasing the wrong dream? Or was the dream worth more than they realized? I took any job I could find. During the day, I stocked shelves at a discount store, pretending not to notice when old friends walked by, pretending they didn't see me. At night, I drove Uber until my legs went numb. Weekends? Selling sneakers online, flipping used electronics, anything that could buy me another day. I kept a notebook in my glove compartment. My war journal, I called it. It had sketches of business ideas, budget scribbles, inspirational quotes, and names of people who said I'd never make it. One night, parked in that same gas station lot, I wrote 4 words on the first page. Never forget this feeling. Because pain, when you channel it, can be the greatest fuel in the world. What was Mason writing in that journal every night? Why keep track of those who doubted him? Was it just spite or strategy? One particularly rough night, I picked up a late Uber fare outside a country club. An older man, maybe mid-60s, stepped into the back seat. He smelled like cigars and aftershave, wore a coat that looked older than me but twice as expensive. He was silent for most of the ride, but noticed my fingers tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel. You a musician? He asked. No, just thinking, I replied. What do you think about when you drive strangers at 2 a.m.? He asked, amused. I hesitated. Then I said the truest thing I'd ever said. About not doing this forever. He chuckled. By the end of the ride, he asked what I really wanted to do. I told him I used to run a startup. He asked why I stopped. I didn't, I said. I just lost the first round. He didn't tip me, but he handed me a card. Eric Jameson, private real estate developer. Who was this stranger, Mason, met that night? Why did he seem interested in Mason's mindset instead of his resume? Was this just a coincidence or something more? I stared at that card for 2 days before calling. Our first meeting was awkward. I was underdressed, nervous, and suspicious. But Jameson saw something in me. Not charm, not polish, not credentials. Hunger. He offered me an apprenticeship. No salary, just commissions and a roof over my head, literally. He let me crash in a unit from one of his lower-tier rentals while I worked in the field. I learned everything: zoning, tenant law, permits, property auctions. While others partied or gave up, I worked. Weekdays, I shadowed contractors and negotiated with brokers. Weekends, I studied tax loopholes and reinvested every penny. What made Jameson take a chance on Mason? Was he grooming a partner or testing a successor? 8 months later, I bought my first property, barely more than a shell of a house in foreclosure. I fixed it up with my own hands. Slept on the floor with no insulation. Sold it 3 months later for a small profit. Then I did it again. And again. The money wasn't the goal. The freedom was. Eventually, Jameson trusted me with more. Commercial buildings, partnerships, and when I saw that Parkline Plaza was up for sale, a half-occupied, mismanaged office tower downtown, I saw not just opportunity, I saw poetic justice. Because Grayson and Company had just moved into the 4th floor. Their CEO, Derek Vaughn, had announced it proudly on LinkedIn just weeks earlier. I called Jameson. "We're buying that building," I said. And we did. Why buy the building your old company moved into? Was it revenge or a calculated long play? How would Mason use this power, and when would he strike? For nearly a year, I kept it quiet. Let Grayson and Company sign their lease. Let them settle in. I took the stairs every time I visited, avoiding the people I once worked beside. I sat in on meetings in different clothes, under a different name, with different hair. They didn't recognize me, and I didn't correct them, because the plan was still unfolding. Why was Mason hiding in plain sight? What was he waiting for before revealing the truth? Back in the present, standing outside that same building I once only dreamed of entering through the front door again, I thought back to that rainy night in the Civic. The world had laughed at me, but I hadn't laughed back. I'd built in silence. I'd worked in the dark. Now, I was the storm coming through the front door. The clock on my burner phone hit 3:17 a.m. The room was dim, except for the glow of a second-hand laptop perched on a wobbly folding table. I sat in a cheap swivel chair that creaked every time I leaned too far to one side. Around me, scattered notebooks, printouts of building permits, zoning maps, and post-it notes that looked like the scribbles of a madman. To anyone else, it was chaos. To me, it was architecture. Not of buildings, but of revenge. After months under Eric Jameson's wing, I had begun to see the world differently. Real estate wasn't just about buildings or tenants, it was about power. Quiet, legal, systemic power. And unlike startups and fickle tech investors, real estate had leverage that couldn't be deleted with one bad quarter. The first time I saw a property auction in person, I felt like I was watching a high-stakes poker game, except most of the players didn't know they were holding winning hands. So I studied. And I moved like a ghost. By day, I dressed in boots and paint-stained jeans, helping contractors drywall forgotten duplexes. By night, I was deep in public records, identifying neglected buildings and owners desperate to sell. No one knew my name. And that was the point. Why was Mason keeping everything a secret, even from the people helping him? What would happen if someone from his past recognized him before he was ready? It was a game of inches. I didn't have money, so I used time. I didn't have friends in high places, so I made connections in low ones. Plumbers, inspectors, repo agents, city clerks who hated their bosses and talked too much on coffee breaks. Every scrap of information became part of the machine. Eventually, I found my rhythm. Buy cheap, renovate clean, rent high, repeat. And I never lived in any of the buildings I owned. That would make me visible. Instead, I stayed in spare rooms, sublets, occasionally back in my car if deals went south. I didn't care. Comfort wasn't the mission. Why was Mason sacrificing comfort, health, even sleep for this grind? Was this just about rebuilding his life, or proving something deeper? The turning point came 6 months in. I found a 6-unit apartment complex buried under city violations and unpaid taxes. The owner, a retired dentist, had inherited it from a cousin and didn't want to deal with the headache. He wanted out, I wanted in. But I didn't have the $60,000 he was asking. Not even close. So I pitched Jameson, showed him the numbers, the potential cash flow, and how quickly I could turn it around. He agreed, but only if I put up something of my own. "I don't invest in anyone who has nothing to lose," he said. So I sold my car, my watch, every last piece of tech I had left. I bought in at 10% equity. He financed the rest. I closed the deal on a Thursday, and on Monday, I was scrubbing mildew from bathroom tile with my bare hands. Was this Mason's big break, or another trap waiting to collapse? Why was Jameson investing in him when others wouldn't? What did he get out of it? 3 weeks later, the building was fully occupied. 2 months after that, I refinanced and bought out another 10%. I started building an LLC under a pseudonym, MC Holdings. No social media, no paper trail, just results. By the end of the year, I controlled 4 properties, 3 shells in progress, and 1 commercial building downtown. A crumbling tower listed for half its worth. Parkline Plaza. The seller thought I was just a rep for Jameson. He didn't ask questions when we paid in cash and signed under the holding company. It wasn't illegal. It was just strategic. Because I wasn't ready to be seen yet. Not until I was in the right place. At the right moment. Why build under an alias? What would happen if Mason's identity came to light too soon? While I worked in secret, I kept tabs on Grayson and Company. Derek had been promoted to executive director. LinkedIn said he was transforming corporate culture. Funny, he never mentioned firing a man in front of 10 people to get there. They moved into the 4th floor of Parkline Plaza in the spring. I watched them carry their branded coffee mugs and team-building banners into the very building they now rented from me. They didn't recognize the man walking past them in paint-splattered overalls, and I didn't wave. Because this wasn't the end game. Was Mason planning to confront Derek? Or was this about something bigger than just one man? Jameson called one evening. "You've done more in 12 months than some men do in a decade," he said. "What's next?" I didn't even have to think. "Leverage," he chuckled. "That's not a goal. That's a weapon." Exactly. Because owning the building wasn't enough. I wanted control over the contracts, the vendors, the leases. I wanted every single person in that tower to unknowingly work under my thumb. I wanted to offer jobs and reject applications. I wanted to walk into Grayson and Company, uninvited, and have them wonder how I got there. What was Mason really after? Money, status, or poetic justice? Was this obsession sustainable, or would it consume him in the process? I developed a ritual. Every time I acquired a new asset, I went back to that gas station off Route 58. Same parking spot, same crooked sign above the door. I'd sit for a moment in silence, staring at the raindrops on the windshield. And I'd open my war journal. On the front page, under Never Forget This Feeling, I added 3 more words. But don't stop here. Because this wasn't just a comeback. This was a blueprint for domination. When the mask finally comes off, what will happen to the people who once laughed at him? The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and the silence inside Parkline Plaza's 4th floor was loud. I stepped into the same office I had been dragged out of 2 years earlier, only this time I didn't need permission to enter. People turned, startled by my presence. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, no logo, no flashy watch. Just presence. I carried a leather folder under my arm and walked slowly, letting the silence stretch like a rubber band about to snap. I stopped in front of the glass-walled corner office. Derek Vaughn sat behind the same desk he used to lean on when he told me I wasn't executive material. He glanced up, confused, then annoyed, then afraid. "You," he said. "Do you have an appointment?" I smiled. "Didn't need one." I placed the folder on his desk and slid it toward him. Inside, a formal lease termination notice, effective in 30 days. Why was Mason evicting the company that fired him? Was this his final move, or just the beginning of something bigger? Derek's face went pale as he flipped through the pages. Legal, binding, airtight. "I don't understand. You're just some contractor, some—" "I own this building," I interrupted calmly. He blinked. "I own Parkline Plaza. Bought it under MC Holdings last year. Grayson and Company has been paying me rent for 12 months. I leaned in just enough for my words to sting. "I gave you a whole year, Derek. Thought you'd remember who I was before now." What would Derek do now that the truth is revealed? Could he save face, or would he finally have to admit what he did? He stood abruptly, rage boiling over. "This is illegal. You're using personal vendettas to terminate a lease?" "Number, I'm enforcing a clause you signed without reading." I tapped the folder. "You failed to meet performance benchmarks in the Q3 report. You breached the contract." I paused. "Just like you said I breached company expectations 2 years ago. Fair's fair, right?" His mouth opened, then closed. Was Derek finally realizing he'd underestimated Mason all along? What will happen to Grayson and Company without its flagship office? Word spread like wildfire. In the lobby, former co-workers stared at me like I was a ghost resurrected. One even whispered, "Is that Mason?" Like my name had become some forbidden story they only told behind closed doors. I walked past them without bitterness. Not because I forgot. Because I no longer needed revenge. I had outgrown them. Was Mason still chasing justice? Or had he found something greater than payback? Later that week, I returned to that gas station off Route 58. Not in a beat-up Civic this time, but in a modest hybrid SUV. I barely drove because I walked to most of my meetings. I sat in the exact same parking spot, opened the glove box, pulled out the war journal. There were over 200 names in it now. Some who doubted me, some who helped me. I added one more name. Derek Vaughn taught me what not to become. Then I turned the page. Was this the end of the journey? Or a brand new beginning? Jameson visited me later that month. He handed me a deed. "Your first solo purchase," he said, grinning. "Officially off my leash." I looked down at the paperwork. A school building in a struggling neighborhood, abandoned, graffiti-covered, forgotten by time and policy. "You said you wanted to build something real," he said. "Let's see if you mean it." I nodded. Slowly. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. Was Mason finally ready to give back? Could the man who was once homeless now offer shelter and opportunity to others? I started a community workspace in the old school building. converted classrooms into co-working labs, hosted free weekend workshops for young entrepreneurs from low-income neighborhoods, kids who didn't see CEOs who looked like them, or second chances for guys who failed once. We taught them how to register LLCs, pitch ideas, read contracts. I brought in guest mentors. Even Jameson taught a few sessions. People asked, "Why do you do it for free?" Because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing, and how much it meant when one person believed in me. Could Mason's story now become someone else's lifeline? How many lives could change from the very pain he once endured? One rainy afternoon, a young man named Tariq lingered after a session. He said, "You really used to be homeless?" I nodded. Car smelled like gas station fries for 6 months. He looked down, nervous. "I'm kind of there now," he said. I paused, then handed him a business card. "Come by tomorrow. We'll find you a place. You just show up ready to learn." His eyes welled up, just like mine once had. Was this how the cycle finally broke? Not with money, but with mercy? 2 weeks later, I ran into Lana, my ex. She was standing in line at a cafe, staring at the drink menu like it owed her answers. We locked eyes. "Wow," she said. "You look different." "I feel different," I replied. There was a pause. "I heard about the building," she added. "Grayson's moving out. That was you?" I just nodded. She looked away. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in you back then." I didn't need the apology, but I accepted it anyway. "Me too," I said softly. "But I'm glad you got out when you did. That pain? It woke me up." She smiled, faintly, and walked away. Was closure always this quiet? Or had Mason simply learned peace? That night, I sat on the roof of the old school-turned incubator. City lights stretched in the distance. I thought of the people who laughed at me, the people who helped me, and the person I had become because of them all. I no longer needed to prove anything. I didn't need to post my story online, or flex in luxury cars, or announce my success to the world. I was living proof that you can lose everything and still rise again. Stronger, wiser, kinder. What would you do if the world gave up on you? Comment below. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe.